Welcome back to the Driven Leadership Podcast, everybody. We're excited to be back in a little groove after taking the month of May a little hiatus. It was a hiatus for our podcast. I don't know what the opposite of a hiatus is, but that's what it was for our trainings and other classes that we were running through the month of May.
Nice to have time to do this.
Yeah.
To breathe.
Crazy
Yeah.
month.
So my name's Connor. I'll be your guide, pun intended, on today's episode because we are talking about... You can go back and listen to episode 1 to catch that reference. I'm pretty sure we talked about Delilah like in the very first or second.
Yeah, I remember that.
episode.
I remember that. That was a while ago. Yeah.
Core memory
First
for
one, third
half the
one,
team.
fourth one.
Yeah. And now the 36th or 37th.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. But yeah, so we're here today with Eric and Mary. We're talking about storytelling in leadership, which may not be a overt connection for a lot of people. So we're going to connect those dots. And Eric has prepared a 30-minute story for everyone.
I've got
Oh,
right.
he can. He can talk. Yeah, he can do an hour story.
You know, okay, so you guys are making fun. And I got excited about this topic. And the reason I got excited is because, and it's funny, this showed up today. So we're working on building a class right now on communication. And funny enough, the part of the process that we're working on is around connection and just kind of working through some material that's been created before. And I've always been, my family, right? We grew up and education and getting concepts and all this is super important. And I always have been the one that would get stuck. And so I get stuck on a concept and if I wouldn't get it, I just remember math being this horrible thing. And then my mom would do such a great job of connecting it to a story, something to help me relate. Like, how would you use math and how would this show up and all those type of things. Yeah. Until it got to the advanced stuff. And then nobody knew how to use that or where it would ever be applicable unless you're launching rockets, but that's fine.
Yeah.
And so what I started using, especially when it got to more advanced concepts, is it was stories. And so when I got into the business world, I found out that a lot of times I would take these complex things and I boil it down into a story that people could understand. And typically within leadership, the way I would connect when I was running a department, we've got a more advanced concept, is I would do what my mom did to me for these concepts as I was growing up, which was connect to stories that made it tangible and easier to understand and digest.
Yeah.
And so for me, storytelling is a way of learning. It's a way of connecting. It's a way of communicating. And quite frankly, I don't know that I would have made it through half the classes I have growing up without it. So the concept I got excited about because it's one that's had a major positive impact on my life. That's why you saw the excitement.
No, I love it.
So when I think about stories, there's something it connects to a feeling, an emotion. It makes you want to take action. Logic produces thought, and stories produce action, or they prompt. So logic prompts thought, and storytelling, which is emotion, prompts. I can't talk. Prompts action.
Yeah.
And I think about that is so true because when I look at books or I read books, not just look at them.
I like to look at books and never open.
I look at books too.
One.
I don't open them.
I love to look at them.
You look at them.
Oh, I don't know.
I don't think so. I think that stays. I think all of this stays.
So I do want to get into practicality. I meant to open this with at the top too, but we are not talking about Donald Miller's work here today. The story branding, like building a story brand.
Yeah.
The hero, the guide, all that stuff. So you can click off now if you thought that's what this episode was about, because it's not. We are not certified.
It's better. It is better.
Yes. Well,
we think
yes,
so.
We will decide at the end if this is better than Story Brand, which is wildly successful. But we're talking about more in the realm of, I think, Mary, you said it, you kind of got down to the root of it. It's like, how do we as leaders prompt, promote, inspire action to be taken by taking these complex ideas or a complex thought, financial return, ROI, a 3-5 year goal, and turn it into something that is tangible for the people that are under us. So so I'd love to hear, Eric, in your experience, and Mary, what you've seen just through your own journey. Like, how is this done really well, and where do you use it? Because I can't imagine, it's an everyday thing. You do your stand-up meetings and, oh God, here he goes. He's got a story about whatever to connect the dots. So where do you use it?
I want to a little shout out here to Amber Johnson. Okay, so she's so we run Facial Lounge together. Became a partner with her about 7 years ago, and she built the company from 2020. She only speaks in stories. Okay, I'm just letting you know, is she will get in. She is first of all, she's a high I personality for those that out there. So she's got the more gregarious, outspoken, connects with people. So if I go to her and I say, hey, we don't know the answer to this problem, she immediately, her first thought is, who do I know that has that problem or that issue? She goes and talks to them, and then she comes back and she tells us a story. And that story, when she's done with the story, literally it takes every part of you to resist not buying into whatever she sold during that story.
Yeah.
And that the old phrase, facts tell, stories sell. So yes, if we're giving information and it needs to be factual, that's not really a story, that's data points. But if we are influencing, which leadership is about influence, and we are looking to help shift behavior or get a response or get connection emotionally to something, my belief is it needs a story. And to me, Amber Johnson is the perfect example. We got to get her on here for one of these podcasts. I know we've talked about that, but we got to do it. And the interesting thing is, the more she gets into the story, the more I get into the story. And the more she's emotionally connected to it, the more I get emotionally connected to it. And when I get emotionally connected to things, I work harder to make them happen. And so I just think stories, and we're not talking made up or fictional stories. We're talking about real application, especially in business, real application use stories. It is a management leadership tool to be able to take situations and dial it into, how does that connect to me? How does that connect to the world? And help us kind of feel what's going on. So a real example of this might be, hey, we want to produce better. We want to increase our EBITDA and make the percentage better. That's what we're shooting for. And we go back to our team and go, hey, everybody, we're going to make more money. We're going to get the EBITDA better. We're going to be in a better place to sell the company. Okay. Yeah, we're going after that. Maybe
what's an EBITDA? That's
right. Well, so first of all, okay, what's EBITDA? Probably right. But even if you just kept it simple and you're talking about profit, what's in it for me? Why should I care? What difference does it make? All these things. So an example of that might be, so Mary and I, for years, we used to run a teen leadership program within Driven, and it was
that program. Oh my gosh,
incredible what it did for these teenagers. But the problem with it was that, first of all, the teen market for programs on leadership, while it's all over the place, it's typically less than what you get in business. So financially, it's hard to run that. So what our thought was, let's create a nonprofit out of that. And let's get something that people could get really excited about doing, connect into local business. They could put it on the resume for college or for works as a leadership program, get them sponsored by local business. Like, we've got this whole thing really excited about, and the curriculum kicks ass. I mean, it's awesome when they go through it. Yet we wanted to set it up as this nonprofit. We need this cash fund to do it. And so I could talk to our team about going, hey, we need net profit so we can have more money to do things. And I can say that, or I can connect them into the story I'm telling you about, and I can have them meet some of these kids and the lives that were changed. I mean, one of them we're still following. He's freaking on tour right now with Lady Gaga as a dancer with them.
Xavier Brown.
That guy, I freaking love this guy. He did a backflip in the middle of graduation for the class. He was one of our last classes we did.
Yeah.
And he was sitting there, and I won't get into his class, but he had all these discoveries. And he's like, I want to go after this even when people say I can't. And he was talking about dancing in his life. And I don't know if we were the factor, the point that got it there, but I know we contributed. I know we're a piece of it. And I think about those stories, and I'm like, man, if we had this program, I know we'd be impacting people in a different way. Well, it requires our business to have net profit to be able to make that kind of impact. a bigger net profit than we do.
Yeah.
And so that's the drive. That's why we want to go after net profit. And for people like you, Connor, that could be involved with it and helping and making a difference out there and doing more things, I think it'd be an amazing program for all of us to get involved with. Now, I don't know if my story was amazingly compelling, but for me, I get excited
you made me
about
want
that.
you made me want to start the teen program
I was
again.
gonna say I can hear it in
like, oh my gosh, I'm looking at you going, no, because it put me right back into the class. So you know, Con, you were asking about where we do stories, right? Mm-hmm. He just did a perfect example of it. Well, I'm like, sign us up, you know.
Yeah.
But it connects people to, I want what that person had or did. Roger Bannister, we use that story all the time about challenging belief systems. When you use stories in teaching and someone has seen someone else do hard stuff, come against odds, it inspires them to take action. You've heard me talk about 3 feet from gold. That story, I've done it in sales talks. In business where it is so hard. And if you go to stop, usually when it's so hard is where we're going to have our breakthrough. And 3 feet from gold is a story that has inspired me to keep pushing through.
Yeah. We had a whole episode dedicated to phrases or stories that kind of shift so we can go back and check that out. What
Martin Luther King was huge. That you talk about a leadership story, like a leader who used stories to compel action.
Yeah.
In I Have a Dream, people connected to that dream.
Yeah. But I just think it really comes down to leadership is about influence. And we influence through connecting as human beings, connecting emotionally in most cases. Yes, some people are very factual based and they want the data. Most of us, we want to know why. We want to know what's that story, what's the thing that's driving it. And when we know the why, then we can choose to get connected to it or not. And so to me, that's how it's, and what I don't want to do, you talk about how do we use stories. I don't want to use it in a way to manipulate people to my case. I want to use it to connect with them is where I want to come from with it.
Yeah. I mean, because I think I would definitely define myself as more of the logical individual, but the motivation to be logical always comes from something. And so that something in a lot of cases still connect to stories. So it's one of those things. I mean, shout out also to Jesus, heavy use of parables, right? To drive home points. And I think a really key thing, and it's funny because this is kind of the point, maybe not the point, but a point in the story brand that Donald Miller does with marketing. They go so hard on telling a story because whenever you tell stories, when you're reading stories or you're watching movies and TV shows, you innately put yourself as a character in that story, which is why it's so powerful. And so in the marketing aspect, you want to convey a message where your consumer can imagine themselves using your product. As a leader, it's that same kind of concept where you want your team to envision themselves. I mean, Mary literally said it. I'm seeing myself back in that class. Where they envision themselves being part of the journey.
I actually just, when you were talking about that, there was a company that actually Eric and I met, and they did storytelling in a way through the core values. And we were in an all company meeting, and they divided us up into 5 different groups with 5 different core values. And we had to act out. We had to create what that value meant. Do you remember that? It was the coolest thing. And it was a story through the value that we created, but it was so sticky.
Yeah.
And I still remember, Eric, you were like, it was the pioneering. It's like you were coming alive. Yeah. I mean, that sounded weird, but it was
sounded real weird.
that was 20 some years ago.
Hold on. We got to tell this story because the way you just posed that, now it sounds
I'm so
weird.
confused. I'm just imagining Eric at the front of like a ship in a pioneering.
This is all I remember. This is over 20 years ago. Yeah. It was over 20 years ago, and it was like an all company. We worked for this company. This was actually the company Mary and I worked
at.
Where we met. And so, different groups, and they acted out the values and bringing the values to life is what it was. And so and it's a leadership company, so people go for it. I mean, it's like, it's Halloween, everybody dresses up. Like it's that type of culture.
Oh, okay.
So we're acting out the values. People are really acting out the values. So our value that we had to do was pioneering, and I don't remember exactly all the details, but it was like everybody's kind of going through the status quo. So everybody was kind of like doing the same thing, and then all of a sudden I just erupted out of that. It was like some theater production,
birthing, yes.
And I was like the pioneering one that was doing something different. So I don't know if that made it better telling that story, but that was what happened.
But what you're doing, it's the belief, it's creating this visual and this emotion into why things matter. John Maxwell uses stories all through his leadership books, and when he talks, it brings the concepts to life. Patrick Lencioni story, but at the end he has, here's the plan. Mark Victor Hansen did the same thing, or Jack Canfield. They tell stories and then they share the leadership principle, which makes it come to life.
Hey everybody, it's Connor. Just wanted to jump in here real quick before we get to the last half of the episode about how to incorporate storytelling into your leadership style, and let you know about a couple upcoming dates for our Bold and Forge classes. So we've talked about Bold quite a bit on the show. We actually have a whole episode dedicated to it. You can check that out. But Bold is our 2.5-day advanced leadership program. It's an intensive, immersive experience for either seasoned leaders or managers and leaders that are coming up and they're pretty new in this in their role. So we always take a break in the summer. The camps that we use fill up with summer campers, but starting back in August, we're going to have a Bold class every single month for the rest of the year, August through December in 2025. So we're really excited to offer a class every single month. They'll be in Washington or California. Our dates are listed on our website, and you can email us podcast@drivenleadership.com if you want to get signed up or get more info on it. And yes, you heard me say Forge. We haven't talked a lot about Forge because we haven't run one in a while, but we're excited to be planning one for fall of 2025. Forge is basically a follow-up to Bold. It's a Bold style class, but specifically designed for teams. So you bring yourself and a couple other key leaders in the business, and you really learn how to dial in and execute as a high-performance team. So we are stoked to be building that class out for the end of this year. Definitely let us know if you want to get your team signed up for that one or learn more. Okay, that's all. Now we'll get back to the episode. What I want to really focus on, and as we kind of steer towards the last half of the episode, because I hear what you're saying about Amber Johnson, high I personality, easy to do it.
Sometimes it's too much. I'm just saying that.
Right. I think there's definitely a balance. But for people who are maybe listening to this and just struggle with that, really, interpersonal relationships in general, but then being able to connect to their team, what would be some advice or a roadmap for them to use to start incorporating storytelling kind of into their leadership style? How would somebody go from not using it at all to starting to use it and see how it fits and feels for them personally?
There's so many incredible. So there's a number of things I think about here, and I think there's some precursors to it. One, first of all, you got to want to connect with people. Yeah. And so there's some people that just don't want it. To want to connect also means that there's some level of vulnerability in there. There's some level of letting you pass just the normal professional guard by telling a story that's real.
Yeah, there's a bit of creativity involved, which by nature is vulnerable. So some people have a hard boundary with that, which is probably not. This is probably not the podcast for you then. But
I've met people that are literally like they don't even talk about anything that happens in their personal life at work. Yeah. They will not interact those, and that's fine if that's the person. But real hard to connect with them if I work with them.
Yeah.
Like they would drive me nuts. I would probably, to the point of offending them, keep pounding them and ask them about their personal life. That's me.
I believe, but 100%.
And I don't mean as a manager. I just mean as a coworker. I know you do. So, But okay, so first we got to want it. We got to want some level of connection and vulnerability to maybe not want the vulnerability, but be willing to go there. And then the next part of this is how we actually tell a story. Anybody can tell a story, but you connecting with the story you're telling as you're telling it versus just giving information that took place. So difference might be, okay, I don't know. I drove to one of our relatives' houses, and I can say I left the driveway, I went down the street, I took a right, I took a left. I'm telling sort of the story that I went on, at least the way I went. I passed a grocery store. There were some cars on the side. I went through a stoplight, right? I'm giving information, but I'm not really telling a story. The telling of the story is, man, I was backing up the driveway, and I remember it so well because it was a rainy day. I was worried because I didn't have my backup cameras. I was afraid I was going to hit the pole as I was backing down because I was in such a hurry. And I was in such a hurry because my relative had called me and they were freaking out because they were cooking something and the stove lit on fire. They didn't know what to do. They didn't even have a smoke detector because it was chirping. They took the batteries out. And none of this actually happened. I'm making this up.
But it creates empathy, right? It just created the visualization of empathy.
But can you tell it? Can you talk to it in a way that connects with people? To me, I got to connect first with it, and it helps paint pictures. It was a rainy day. I was worried. My emotion is connected into it. What was I seeing? What was I thinking about? What was going on? Why was I heading over there? What's the urgency behind it? And we start to get into, and I think those things come naturally if you start really connecting with the story. Yeah. But if you want to plot that out on a list of all the things you can talk about, which if you think about like writers who write stories, they have those lists. They have the, I need to include it this way. And for me, I've never been that way.
Yeah. I also know that when leaders are open and they're willing to be a little bit vulnerable and transparent, it creates trust. It creates a different level of openness. There are times that when I'm teaching or training and I use a personal story, over and over and over, people will say, you have no idea how much that meant to me. You're not just out here being a teacher. You're letting us get to know you and understand that you've gone through things too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually interesting because I think there could be some sort of delineation there between telling stories as kind of like a frontline leader rallying the troops, like here's the vision, creating urgency and buy-in through storytelling, but then also storytelling on like, I think about like one-on-one coaching conversations because especially in one-on-one coaching conversations, especially ones that I've had and been on the receiving end of, when you're building and developing leaders, a lot of the concepts are hard to communicate, like empathy and emotional intelligence. And I mean, that's what we do on this show all the time is loop in personal anecdotes and stories that drive the point home. So, because I mean, it's so much easier to drive home that a point when you have a story to back it up. So I think it's actually, I hadn't thought about that when we started talking about this, but in those one-on-one coaching conversations, don't try to tackle these huge topics and, train them up I mean, you can do that, but also, incorporate stories, bring in your own personal, show some vulnerability, build trust through that lens. I think that's really powerful.
This might have helped us with that class we were working on earlier today.
I know, right?
I don't know if there was any stories to pull us out of the hole that we were in.
No, super communicators though. Charles Duhigg, he used stories throughout there that connected us. We were talking about that.
I still love that story. So he's in there and he's talking about connection. He's talking about this stuff, and he uses a story about how they interviewed for the lead of astronauts. NASA did. Yeah, they were interviewing. Right. And that story sticks with me. So there's something about this, and I know there's a lot of science behind it, but using a story, you remember it, you connect to it. It's easier, applicable.
Yeah.
I do have to say though, when you are as a leader using stories, and if it is your own story, that there's a balance to where you're relating, you're connecting, yet it's not about you. Because I've seen sometimes that leaders, they'll get wrapped up into storytelling and it all becomes about them, and you lose your group.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a balance.
That's huge. I just keep thinking about that person who is very low I. Maybe they're a manager and they're looking to incorporate this. Anything else before we wrap it up?
Use clips.
Clips?
Use story clips. Like
what is it?
Sport. We've
What's
done
a
that.
Story clip.
You know, like like a TikTok or a YouTube or something, a video. We've done that many times where it's been like a sports something.
Let someone else tell the story because you suck at it.
Right. So if you're struggling telling a story and you want to drive a point home, use a movie clip. Yeah. And now debrief it and tie it into your bigger vision and purpose.
Just so video of The Office as to what to not do, and then you can work right off of it. That really works.
Yeah, like I talk about Roger Bannister. If anyone has ever watched the YouTube on him running the 4-minute mile, where they said he couldn't do it, you could not physically run a 2 or 4-minute mile, otherwise your lungs would explode. You know, you would die. Yeah. And when I watched the video and it was under 4 minutes, and he collapses and he thought he died, and he gets up and he's like, "Oh my gosh!" You know. But those are stories that you can use another clip to someone. There's different ways to do it.
Actually, I think it's a fair point. Yeah, if you're not good at storytelling, definitely use media. People connect to characters that they may know, or that it's just done. It's well produced. So
I guess I'm more someone who just kind of works and thinks on the fly. Mary is as well. You're more of a planner, Connor. So if you've got a point you want to get across, does it help you to kind of plan it and think it through and like prepare a story? Is that helpful?
No, because I'm actually, and I've been thinking about what I'm realizing in this. I don't know if what I do is storytelling, but I do use a lot of I love a good like metaphor and like really expounding on a metaphor, which I think is in the same vein. I mean, again, like using Jesus as a role model in that of just
because
a lot of I'm just saying. Well, because a lot of the stories, I don't know if I'd categorize what I do or what I've ever done in leadership as storytelling, but more like a parabolic kind of. It is made up, but it is, and then it's constructed in a way that drives the point home, or there's a clear like decision or a turning point, and then a solid like I was gonna say CTA, but a call to action like at the end, like this is the result of what happened. So but and I can do those on the fly. I don't necessarily have to sit down. The idea, as we're talking about this, the idea of coming up with a story to tell sounds god awful to me. But if I had to just get up in front of some people and be like, "Hey, explain this complex idea, issue," I could do that. But in my own head, I don't say that it's a story. It's more of just like a concept bubble wrapped with, and some kind of story arc, but not with like defined characters or anything like that.
You know where I think we're using the word story, but real feedback told through the lens of a story is really powerful. Yeah. And I heard this just the other day. There was a HVAC company. We were in there, and the leadership group had a service tech, which is one that goes out and works on the machines, just do an amazing job with the client. Okay, so you go back to the rest of the team. They want to highlight it. They want to give public praise and feedback to the rest of the group, so the rest of the group can learn, hey, here's what we want to do, and also to acknowledge the effort that this person had put in. And they came back and they did it in the form of a story. So they come back and they go, hey, I want to take a minute. I want to tell you about the client visit that Bob had just yesterday. Bob, will you come up here for a minute? So Bob goes into this client and they start, I don't know the story, but they went in and they're like, Bob went into the client and it was actually, I remember it was an elderly group, and the person just seemed distraught and was nervous. And then Bob did this, and this, and had this conversation and sat down with them for a little bit and walked them through it before they went there. And just, they told the story, they sat at their kitchen table. They They went belly to belly with him, so to speak. That's probably not good with an old. You get the point. But they sat down with him and got them comfortable, and then they did the work, and then afterwards they took pictures and they showed them, which is their process anyway.
Right.
But they went through and highlighted in this special condition and what the story was around it with Bob there. So they gave feedback, they gave a story, they highlighted what they wanted, and the end result is people remembered it. People are like, and so I think there are many places to use stories. But I think at the end of the day, when we want to influence, when we want to connect people to this, when we want people to get it and make it sticky and learn from it, all of those things really connect them with stories because we remember them better and they connect to our emotions.
Yeah. 100%.
Inspire action. Yeah. It's Maya Angelou. She has that quote that says, people won't remember what you said, what they did, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And oftentimes within a story, especially if it is a call to action and it's real, you will always walk away remembering what that person, how they made you feel.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I think from now on, I'm only going to communicate in story mode. So be prepared for that.
You could have told that to us in the story.
See, I have so much work to do. Once upon a time.
In a faraway land.
We were doing so good till the end here. Okay.
Well, thanks for joining us, everybody, and sticking around to the end here. If you have any questions or comments about storytelling, or if you have just a really good story that you tell your people all the time, and they may be sick of hearing, let us know. We want to hear them for the first time. You can email us podcast@drivenleadership.com. And otherwise, we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks, guys.
Bye.